The HOA president stood in my driveway at 7 a.m. screaming about illegal construction and threatening to have my lake cabin renovation shut down. She had no idea she was about to go to war with the district attorney who'd sent 3 corrupt officials to prison last year. I was on my second cup of coffee, reviewing case files on my laptop at the kitchen table, when the shouting started outside. Through my window, I could see a woman in an expensive pantsuit standing next to a white Mercedes, pointing at my cabin renovation and talking rapidly into her phone. "I don't care what permits he claims to have," she was saying loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear. "This construction is destroying our property values and violating every aesthetic standard we've established. Shut it down today or I'll find officials who will." I set down my coffee and walked outside, still wearing my pajamas and slippers. The woman turned toward me with the kind of aggressive confidence that comes from years of bullying people who can't fight back. "Are you the owner of this project?" she asked, gesturing at my cabin like it was a toxic waste dump. "I am. And you are?" "I'm Helen Crawford, president of the Lakeside Manor Homeowners Association. This construction monstrosity you're building violates our community standards, exceeds height restrictions, and is an eyesore that threatens everyone's property investments." I looked at my cabin renovation, a beautiful project that would restore the 1940s log structure my grandfather had built, then back at this woman who was apparently declaring war on my family's heritage. "Miss Crawford, I have all the proper permits. The construction is completely legal and follows every county regulation." She laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. "Legal according to whom? Some corrupt county inspector you probably bribed?" "I've already contacted the State Construction Authority, and they're opening an investigation into your permits today." That's when I realized Helen Crawford had just made the biggest mistake of her privileged life. She'd accused a sitting district attorney of bribing public officials. "Ma'am, that's a very serious accusation. You're claiming I've committed federal crimes. I'm claiming you've somehow gotten permits for construction that clearly violates our community standards. Whether that involved bribes, lies, or just incompetent officials, I don't care. This eyesore stops today." I smiled, thinking about the irony of what was about to happen. And if I refuse to stop legal construction on my own property? Then you'll discover that rich people have lawyers, connections, and the power to make your life very difficult. I've shut down 6 illegal construction projects in this neighborhood, and yours will be number 7. Miss Crawford, before you threaten me with lawyers and connections, perhaps you should ask who you're talking to. I don't care if you're the governor's brother. No one builds ugly cabins in Lakeside Manor without my approval. I pulled out my phone and made a call that would change everything. "Sheriff Williams? This is District Attorney Peterson. I need a deputy at my residence for a harassment complaint." "Yes, 847 Lakeshore Drive." "Thank you." Helen's confident expression flickered. "District Attorney? That's right. You just accused a sitting DA of bribing officials and threatened to use illegal means to stop lawful construction. Would you like to reconsider your approach?" The color drained from her face, but Helen Crawford wasn't the type to back down easily. "I don't care what your job title is. This construction violates our HOA covenants, and I will enforce them. Show me the covenant that gives your HOA authority over county-permitted construction. Our community standards clearly state." "Show me the legal document. Right now." She pulled out her phone and started scrolling frantically. "I don't carry the covenants with me, but they clearly establish." "Miss Crawford, as a prosecutor, I deal with people who make legal claims they can't support every day. Either produce the document that gives you authority over my property, or leave my land immediately." That's when she made her second catastrophic mistake. "Fine," she snapped, stepping closer to me with her finger pointed at my chest. "You want to play legal games? I have connections you can't imagine. My husband sits on the state construction board. My brother-in-law is a federal judge. My family has more political influence than some small-town prosecutor could ever understand. Are you threatening to use political connections to interfere with legal construction permits? I'm promising to use every resource available to shut down this project and make sure you understand what happens when people challenge me." I was still processing the fact that this woman had just threatened a district attorney with political corruption when Deputy Martinez arrived. Miguel had worked dozens of cases with me over the years, and he immediately recognized the situation. "Morning, Dave. What's the problem?" "Miguel, this is Helen Crawford. She's accused me of bribing officials to get construction permits, threatened to use political connections to shut down legal construction, and is currently trespassing on my property after being asked to leave." Deputy Martinez looked from me to Helen, clearly trying not to smile. "Ma'am, Did you threaten to use political influence to interfere with legal permits? I threatened to expose corruption, Helen replied, her voice shaking slightly as she realized how deep she dug herself. This construction clearly violates community standards. Community standards don't override county permits, I said. And threatening political interference with legal permits is a federal crime. You can't intimidate me with legal jargon, Helen shot back. I know exactly what you're trying to do. What I'm trying to do is renovate my grandfather's cabin with proper permits while being harassed by someone who thinks HOA rules supersede federal law. Deputy Martinez pulled out his notepad. Ma'am, I need to see some identification. As Helen fumbled for her driver's license, I called my assistant district attorney, Sarah Chin, who answered on the first ring. Sarah, it's Dave. I need you to run a background check on Helen Crawford, president of Lakeside Manor HOA. She just threatened to use political connections to interfere with legal construction permits. Political interference with permits? That's a federal felony. I know. She also accused me of bribing officials. I want to know everything about her connections and whether she's done this before. Helen was staring at me with growing horror as she realized the legal implications of her threats. Ma'am, Deputy Martinez said, handing back her license, you need to leave this property immediately. Any further contact with Mr. Peterson regarding this construction should go through attorneys. This isn't over, Helen declared, backing toward her Mercedes. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Actually, I do, I replied. You're dealing with someone who prosecutes people for exactly the crimes you just threatened to commit. After Helen drove away, Miguel and I stood in my driveway discussing what had just happened. Dave, in 15 years of police work, I've never seen someone threaten a DA with political corruption to his face. She has no idea how much trouble she just created for herself. What's your next move? I looked at my cabin renovation, the project that was restoring my family's heritage, and thought about Helen's threats to destroy it through political connections. My next move is teaching Ms. Crawford what happens when you threaten to corrupt the legal system. The investigation into Helen Crawford began that afternoon. Sarah's background check revealed a pattern of harassment that made my blood run cold. Over the past 5 years, Helen had used threats, frivolous lawsuits, and political connections to force 6 families to abandon construction projects in Lakeside Manor. She'd cost people hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees and abandoned investments. Her method was always the same: claim construction violated HOA standards, file bogus complaints with county officials, then use her husband's position on the state construction board to pressure inspectors into finding violations that didn't exist. But the most damning discovery came from county records. Helen's HOA had been collecting construction compliance fees from residents, money that was supposed to ensure projects met community standards. Instead, Helen had been using that money to fund her harassment campaigns against projects she personally disliked. She'd embezzled over $200,000 in HOA funds to pay lawyers who filed frivolous lawsuits against her own neighbors. By Thursday, I had enough evidence to present to a grand jury. But Helen Crawford wasn't finished making mistakes. Thursday morning brought another confrontation that sealed her fate. I was reviewing construction plans with my contractor when Helen arrived with 3 men in suits and a county inspector who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Mr. Peterson, she announced, stepping out of a black SUV like she was leading a SWAT raid, this is Inspector Williams from the County Construction Authority. He's here to revoke your permits based on violations we've documented. Inspector Williams looked uncomfortable as he approached me with a clipboard. Sir, I've received complaints about potential code violations in your construction project. I need to conduct an immediate inspection. Of course, I said, knowing exactly what was happening. What specific violations are alleged? Helen stepped forward with a folder thick enough to stop a bullet. Height restrictions, setback violations, environmental impact, and construction without proper oversight. Inspector Williams examined my permits and compared them to the actual construction. After 20 minutes, he shook his head. Ma'am, this construction appears to comply with all county regulations. The permits are valid and the work matches the approved plans. That's impossible, Helen snapped. This cabin clearly exceeds height restrictions. No ma'am, it doesn't. The structure is within approved parameters. That's when Helen made the mistake that guaranteed her prosecution. Inspector Williams, I think you need to look more carefully. My husband will be very disappointed if this inspection doesn't find the violations we've documented. Inspector Williams stiffened. Ma'am, are you attempting to influence my inspection based on political connections? I'm reminding you that some people have the authority to review your job performance. The silence that followed was beautiful. Helen had just attempted to corrupt a government inspection in front of witnesses, including a district attorney who specialized in prosecuting public corruption. "Inspector Williams," I said carefully, "did Ms. Crawford just threaten your job security if you don't find violations that don't exist?" "That's exactly what I heard," he replied, making notes on his clipboard. Helen realized her mistake too late. "I didn't threaten anyone. I simply mentioned that inspections should be thorough." "By referencing your husband's authority over his job?" I asked. "You're twisting my words. Actually, I'm documenting them. Inspector Williams, would you be willing to testify about this conversation?" "Absolutely." That evening, I called Helen Crawford and offered her one chance to end this without criminal prosecution. "Helen, this is District Attorney Peterson. I'm calling to offer you an opportunity to resolve this situation." "I have nothing to resolve. Your construction is illegal and I will prove it." "Your construction interference is illegal and I have already proven it. You've attempted to corrupt government inspections, embezzled HOA funds, and engaged in systematic harassment of property owners." The silence stretched for nearly a minute. "What do you want?" she finally asked. "I want you to resign from the HOA board, repay the embezzled construction compliance fees, issue written apologies to the 6 families you've harassed, and agree to stop interfering with legal construction projects." "And if I refuse?" "Then Monday morning I present evidence of public corruption, embezzlement and conspiracy to a grand jury. Your husband's position won't protect you from federal charges. You can't prove anything." "Helen, I've prosecuted corrupt officials with less evidence than I have against you. I have recordings of your threats, witnesses to your attempted inspector bribery, and financial records of your embezzlement. You're going to prison unless you accept my offer." Her response was exactly what I expected from someone who'd never faced real consequences. "Go ahead and try. My family has connections you can't touch." Monday morning, I presented Helen Crawford's case to the grand jury. The evidence was overwhelming: recorded threats of political corruption, witness testimony of attempted bribery, financial records showing embezzlement, and a pattern of harassment spanning 5 years. The grand jury returned indictments on 8 felony counts: public corruption, attempted bribery of government officials, embezzlement, conspiracy, and 4 counts of harassment under color of authority. But the real drama came when Helen was arrested at her own HOA board meeting. I'd arranged for the arrest to happen during the monthly Lakeside Manor HOA meeting, where Helen was planning to rally support for stopping my cabin renovation. Instead, she got to explain to 60 neighbors why she was being handcuffed for embezzling their money. Detective Sarah Martinez read the charges in front of the entire community. "Helen Crawford, you're under arrest for public corruption, embezzlement of homeowner association funds, attempted bribery of government officials, and conspiracy to interfere with legal construction permits." The room erupted. Residents who'd been paying construction compliance fees for years discovered their money had been stolen to fund Helen's personal vendettas against neighbors she disliked. But the most satisfying moment came when Helen tried to use her husband's position one last time. "You can't arrest me," she shouted as the handcuffs clicked shut. "My husband sits on the state construction board. He'll have your badges." "Ma'am," Detective Martinez replied, "your husband is being investigated for his role in this corruption scheme. Using official position to interfere with legal permits is a federal crime." The local news coverage was everything I could have hoped for. "HOA president arrested for embezzlement and corruption," was the headline, and the story made Helen look like exactly what she was: a corrupt official who'd stolen from her neighbors to fund harassment campaigns. The video of her arrest at the HOA meeting went viral within hours. #HOA Karen became a trending topic as people shared stories of corrupt homeowner association officials who thought they were above the law. But Helen Crawford wasn't finished destroying her own life. Her husband's investigation revealed that he'd used his state position to pressure county inspectors into finding bogus violations in construction projects his wife opposed. The federal investigation expanded to include mail fraud, wire fraud, and racketeering charges. Helen and her husband had been running a criminal enterprise disguised as HOA enforcement. The trial was scheduled for 6 months later, but Helen's lawyers advised immediate plea bargaining when they saw the evidence. 3 federal agencies had joined the investigation, and the charges now carried potential sentences of 25 years in federal prison. The plea hearing was held on a Wednesday morning in federal court. Helen Crawford, who'd threatened to destroy my cabin renovation through political connections, stood before Judge Morrison in an orange jumpsuit pleading guilty to 8 federal felonies. "Your Honor," the prosecutor read, "the The defendant used her position as HOA president to embezzle over $200,000 in resident fees, attempted to corrupt government inspections through political threats, and conspired with her husband to use official authority to harass property owners engaged in legal construction. Judge Morrison was not sympathetic. Ms. Crawford, you held a position of trust in your community and used it to steal from your neighbors while corrupting government processes. This court sentences you to 3 years in federal prison, 5 years probation, and restitution of $347,000 to victims of your schemes. Her husband received 4 years for using his state position to interfere with legal permits. The civil lawsuits came next. The 6 families Helen had harassed sued for damages, legal fees, and emotional distress. The Lakeside Manor HOA sued for recovery of embezzled funds and mismanagement. Insurance companies sued to recover money paid on Helen's frivolous claims. The total civil liability exceeded $2 million, forcing Helen and her husband to sell their $800,000 lakefront mansion and declare bankruptcy. But the sweetest victory was completing my cabin renovation without further interference. The new HOA board, elected after Helen's arrest, issued a formal apology for her harassment and actually thanked me for exposing the corruption that had been stealing from residents for years. 6 months after Helen's arrest, I was sitting on the deck of my beautifully renovated cabin, watching the sunset over the lake my grandfather had fished 80 years ago. The log structure had been restored to its original beauty, with modern improvements that honored the craftsmanship of the 1940s. The contractor had done magnificent work. Hand-hewn beams, stone fireplace, and wraparound deck that captured every bit of the lake view. It was everything my grandfather had envisioned when he built the original structure. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Chin. Helen Crawford was denied early parole. She'll serve the full 3 years. Thought you'd want to know. I smiled and raised my evening coffee in a toast to justice served. Helen had tried to destroy my family's heritage through corruption and intimidation. Instead, she'd lost her freedom, her home, her husband's career, and her standing in the community she tried to control. The cabin renovation had cost $150,000. Helen's harassment campaign had cost her everything. That evening, my new neighbors stopped by to admire the completed renovation. The Johnsons had moved into Helen's old mansion after buying it from the bankruptcy court at a $300,000 discount. "Dave, this cabin is absolutely beautiful," Mrs. Johnson said, running her hand along the restored log walls. "Your grandfather would be proud." "Thank you. It's exactly what this place was meant to be. We heard about the troubles you had with the previous HOA president. I hope our family can be better neighbors." "You already are. You appreciate craftsmanship instead of trying to destroy it." Mr. Johnson laughed. "We did our research before buying here. Helen Crawford's corruption scandals were all over the news. We made sure the new HOA board understood we wanted a community that respects property rights." As they walked back toward their house, I reflected on the lessons of the past year. Sometimes corrupt people mistake kindness for weakness and authority for immunity from consequences. Helen Crawford had thought her political connections made her untouchable. She tried to use corruption to destroy legal construction and steal money from her neighbors. Instead, she'd learned that threatening a district attorney with political corruption is one of the stupidest crimes you can commit. The next morning brought another perfect sunrise over the lake. I sat on my grandfather's restored deck with my coffee and case files, reviewing evidence for the day's prosecutions. My phone rang at 7 a.m., the same time Helen used to call with her harassment campaigns. "Dave, this is County Inspector Williams. I wanted to give you a heads up about something." "What's going on?" "We just got a complaint about illegal deck construction at your address. Someone claims you're building without permits." I laughed, thinking about who might be stupid enough to continue Helen's harassment campaign. "Who filed the complaint?" "Someone named Richard Crawford. Says he's Helen's brother-in-law and has concerns about construction standards in the neighborhood." "The same Richard Crawford who's married to federal judge Patricia Crawford?" "That's the one. He's demanding an immediate inspection and threatening to contact his sister-in-law if we don't find violations." I set down my coffee and smiled. "Inspector Williams, please schedule that inspection for this afternoon. And bring plenty of documentation. Mr. Crawford is about to get the same education his sister-in-law received. Some people never learn. But as district attorney, I have all the time in the world to teach them." The cabin renovation was complete, but apparently the corruption prosecutions were just getting started. Helen Crawford had tried to destroy my heritage and learned that threatening prosecutors has consequences. Now her family was about to discover that stupidity might be genetic, but it's not a legal defense. I finished my coffee and headed inside to prepare for another day of prosecuting people who think political connections make them immune to the law. The view from my grandfather's cabin had never looked better.